Okay. Hello, and welcome to CURCA's ARC Abstract Workshop. My name is Allison Grindell. I'm the Administrative Assistant for CURCA, and I will be sharing my slides, and myself and our Graduate Assistant, Hannah Johnson, will be going over a little bit of background for the ARC, where to apply, and where to apply, and how to write an abstract. And then we will end off with our student experts, who are Madison Bunch, Sebastian Sherris, and Tyler Wilson, and they'll be giving their tips and tricks on how to kind of craft and work and really think about your abstract. So the biggest question, when is the due date for the abstract? So the abstracts for ARC are due on February 18th.
For calls on a function in the API, what happens after that?
Hi, Petra, are you there? Okay, sorry, apologies. So ARC call for abstracts there till February 18th by midnight. So I believe it's Friday after next, the 18th. You go to ung.edu/UNG-ARC. That'll take us to the UNG Digital Commons page, and you'll be able to log in and submit your abstract there. ARC will actually take place on March 25th on the Gainesville campus, and tentatively, our hours right now are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and that includes poster session and several panels and everything. So we want you to apply via Digital Commons, which is the Nighthawks Open Institutional Repository. So again, you visit ung.edu/UNG-ARC, and you actually go into the left sidebar under contributors where it has submits proposal. You click that, you log in, you might already have an account there, or you might need to create one, and you submit your abstract, and then you can choose whether you'll be presenting a poster or oral presentation.
So when it comes to presenting, I know that there's a lot of anxiety that comes along with that. A lot of people either don't know how to speak at a conference, so like they don't know the jargon, or maybe you feel like you're not going to get accepted at a conference, or it's just basic nerves, public speaking, fear of failure, or last minute presentation. So this is why we feel like ARC is very beneficial to students. So why should you present at ARC? So oftentimes, students who are presenting at ARC also are going on to present at other future conferences. So this is a great way to prepare for that because it is local, it is at UNG, and so therefore it's familiar. You're going to see a lot of your professors or like fellow classmates who are also presenting. It functions as a really good like kind of dry run to kind of get you into the flow of how to present at a conference. It also gives you the opportunity to just talk about this research that you've put a ton of work into, or a project that you've put a ton of work into, and to engage in academic conversation that while you may have been having this conversation with your research partners, you possibly haven't really explained it to other people. So it gives you a time to kind of really delve into what you've been working on. And it also gives you an opportunity to see what other students on campus are working on and to celebrate yours and everyone's work so far.
So on top of writing your abstract, one of the things that you have to decide when submitting is figuring out if you want to do a poster or an oral presentation. So for posters, we usually suggest that for first timers who've never presented at a conference before. Usually what we do is once you have your poster created, we print it out for you, and you'll be standing during the poster session next to your poster. As everyone else is walking around, people might come up to you and talk, and you can give them a 3 to 5 minute, what we call elevator pitch, kind of condensing what your research is or any kind of results you may have found or anything, and they can ask really questions. It's really informal. It really kind of takes the pressure off you, and it's really great also for to help further along your own research, because there might be a few more questions that you might not have thought of that someone might bring up to you. So especially if you're using a lot of graphs, a lot of different pictures and everything, we really suggest a poster for first timers or anything really in the heavy STEM field. The oral presentation, we usually panel you with other people in your discipline or a similar topic. These are for people who have been doing this for a long time, or it can be for first timer if you want to throw your hat in that ring. It's really great for people who are more in the humanities or liberal arts, maybe writing a paper composed to anything with really hard data. And that's usually up to about 10 to 15 minutes rehearsed, like I said, in a panel in front of an audience and a moderator. And then at the end, usually there's formal questions and a few questions for the audience and from the moderator as well. So this is another alternative you can choose. The other thing we also really accept is musical performances and visual presentations. We want the arts represented there as well. And those types can either choose also a poster set to be present in the poster session. We can have your artwork or an oral presentation talking about maybe your creativity or your how you got to this point or what have you. So the big question is, what are you really comfortable with? So really take some time to think about this. The other thing I also wanted to mention, we get this question a lot, is can a group can actually create their own panel? And yes, they can create their own panel if they all want to present during a specific session during the oral presentation. You know, we ask people who want to present together, students, to all submit their abstracts separately. And I think there is a section in the note to administrators where you can put the title of your panel and the other fellow student names that you want to be presenting with. So that way that just lets us know that you want to be paneled together. It also doesn't hurt to follow up and send us an email to let us know and keep an eye out so that when we do receive all the abstracts and we start paneling everyone together in the oral presentations, that we know to put you all in the same slot.
What to expect from an abstract. So when you are going in to write an abstract for ARC, basically what we want is a summary of your project. We want you to give kind of the big picture and why we should care and why you kind of want to present. You are going to want to adapt it to your audience. It's going to be a fairly general audience, but if you are wanting to do like a panel or something like that and making it known that like when we want to, where we can place you in a sense, but it's going to be 250 words. We also have a Prezi. So if you want the link to this PowerPoint, then you will have access to this Prezi that gives you a little more detail. So what we kind of want in an abstract, a little more detailed, we're going to want you to start with the big picture problem or a topic that's widely debated in your field. So why you're kind of studying this. You're then going to want to explain why your research is important, aka like if there's a gap in the literature and your project is filling that gap, we're going to want to know that. You're also going to want to give important details that's either covered in your paper or your poster or project that you're doing. So if it's like a research-based project, you're going to want information from like the methods section, the results, maybe your discussion, and definitely your kind of conclusion. So then you're going to go back and state like your original argument and then give your official conclusion statement. And there's also a link at the bottom as well. So
here is the rubric where we'll be judging the abstracts and everything. As you can see, there's 4 categories on the left side, and it goes from 1 point to the maximum of 4 points for each category. So the categories that the reviewers will be judging you, and they'll be reviewers from different disciplines. We always try to have at least 1 reviewer within your discipline or as close to as possible. And then potentially one that is in a different discipline. So when you're writing your abstract, really keep in mind as well the audience, you know. And so you want to write for a general audience. I know sometimes that's hard depending on your background, your discipline, the type of jargon and words you use. So make sure you really understand writing it for someone who has potentially no clue or someone that has a base understanding and everything. You don't want to be super specific just to your own discipline. So the first category is overall writing quality, you know, including your academic form, grammar and spelling. They'll be looking at your abstract. The second is your thesis statement, hypothesis, or your statement of purpose, you know, judging that as well. If it's clear, if it shows originality, if there are maybe a few issues or maybe the purpose is there, but it's not quite clear, depending on that. The third one is evidence of supporting research or thought related to the thesis, hypothesis, or purpose. So again, looking in the background of the literature and seeing why this matters and why your research matters. And lastly, the significance or relevance of content to the field. You know, how is your research significance? What is it doing differently? What questions are it asking? And so this is where they'll be judging on, and based on that, you'll be accepted or potentially accepted pending revisions or rejected. That's that. Does anyone have any questions before I continue on? No? Okay, great.
So now we're going to switch over to our student experts so that you guys can get kind of an idea from fellow students. So our student experts are Madison, Sebastian, and Tyler. So the first question I'm going to kind of ask you guys is, what do you believe are some of the most important things to think about when it comes to writing an abstract?
I can go ahead and answer that first if you guys would like. So for me personally, like you guys hit it a little bit earlier in the sense that you're going to be presenting to a relatively general audience. There's going to be a lot of people who are not familiar with your field. So definitely embrace the idea of using as much plain language as possible. It doesn't need to have a bunch of fancy words in it. I would say actually, even if it's in your own field, you should still keep it simple. And something to consider is that you're going to, if you continue down whatever path you're going, you're likely going to you're going to get an increased participation from international communities, right? So I know in physics, there are various communities where, you know, there's Chinese communities and European communities, all speaking different languages, you know, going to these different conferences. And if you can keep that language that you're writing in English as simple as possible, that can really help other, you know, researchers from other countries. So that's something that's really, really important to hit home.
I think another thing that's important when writing an abstract that not a lot of people think about is if you haven't written a lot of papers, especially in the science field, you kind of want to keep it to third person, past tense. You don't want to say like, I performed my experiment doing this. You want to keep it like, the experiment was done by doing this, something like that.
And kind of tying along with Tyler's point, with the step-by-step tips that we had earlier in the presentation, realizing how many of them work together, because obviously you want to keep your language simple for a broad audience, or if English isn't their first language, it'll just make it easier for them to understand. But also that first tip of making sure that you identify what the problem you're addressing in your field is, because that's how you get people to care. And that can tie in with simple language. If you're not using simple language and you're using all this jargon and big words to make yourself sound fancy, no one's going to understand what you're saying and no one's going to care. So no one knows what problem you're even addressing.
Thank you, guys. So the next thing, we kind of were talking about this before we even started this session today, but how would you suggest writing an abstract at different stages of your process? So that could be things like maybe not having results yet, or you're still finalizing things and you still are kind of working out the methodology section.
I could take the lead on this one because for my project that I did for Fuse over the last summer, we didn't have results for we didn't have results for most of the summer because we had to wait on interviews and scheduling. So I would say when making your abstract, especially if you don't have results, go with the intent, because obviously you don't have anything. You don't have results, so you can't draw a firm conclusion. But if you're studying the effects of screen time on sleep deprivation or in college students or something like that, and you don't have your results back yet, put more emphasis on the problem that you guys are tackling, so people at least know what you're addressing, and make it clear that you're putting out a hypothesis. This is what we expect to happen, but things could change or results could prove something different.
I think Sebastian hit pretty much everything I was going to say.
In terms of my comments to that, let's see, I have a, yeah, so that, yeah, I guess kind of adding on to it is don't be afraid to talk about the progress that you've made. What's more important is that if you have a next step, if you have, like, there's a reason there's a future work tab and, you know, things like posters, because talking about what you're going to be able to do next is almost as important as the results themselves. And then if there is a tangible next step, don't be afraid to talk about that, is what I would say, which kind of complements what you guys were also saying.
Yeah, and Tyler, I was going to say what you were saying earlier before we started about, you know, even if you presented the same potentially abstract or the same results and everything, even if you haven't done anything different, you know, you can still present, you can still submit and present that and say, you know, hey, you've still been running these tests, nothing has changed, or maybe one or two things have changed. I think that's also really important to know that, you know, research is always this ongoing, evolving thing. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you, Allison. You hit on what I was going to talk about too. So moving on to our next thing, how would you guys describe your writing style / like how you go about starting to write an abstract?
I can start this one if everyone's okay with that. Personally, what I do, since I'm in a STEM field, I start by just making an outline, either in my head or on my computer, of what my project is, the goal of like the research, aka like research question. I do a literature review before I go through different published papers. I see what's missing, if there's any connections that, or like gaps I'm trying to fill, like you guys were talking about earlier. And then I just like list out like brief methodology. If I have any results, I talk about that. And then I just kind of go through and end with conclusions. And then I try and get like a cohesive written abstract out of that outline.
I would say for me, I kind of think of the abstract as just basically a mini paper, right? Like at the end of the day, your abstract should be a representation of everything that you would include in a publication. So if you can condense the really, really important stuff into that short paragraph, then you're on a good track to write a really good abstract.
And I would add to that, editing is key here, because no matter how you pre-write or how you do your outline, or you could just write whatever comes to you until you hit the word limit. Wordiness is a problem for a lot of people, myself included. So it's a good idea to, once you've written out your first version of your abstract, go back over it again and again. Make sure you have all the details necessary for the mini paper, everything you want to say, because every word counts with such a small, you have a lot to explain, 250 words. So make sure you only really have what you need to have there.
I have one more comment to add. Typically what I do is like to have an abstract that appeals to that broad audience that's not necessarily in the science field, is I'll go around and have like my roommate who's an English major, I'll have her read it. I'll give it to my dad and have him read it and see if it just makes sense, and if he can understand like what I'm trying to get out of this paper and this abstract, and basically what is going on in the project.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that I would say is definitely hitting on Sebastian's point of, you really don't realize how little 250 words is until you start writing and realize, oh my gosh, now I've got to cut like all this out because I'm way past the 250 words. And I think that making sure that you are definitely keeping the wordiness down and making sure you are strictly getting what you think is the most important information in there will really help. But when it comes to the next question, what kind of tips do you guys have, or maybe someone has given to you in the past, that might help others going into the abstract writing process?
One tip that I've gotten is don't be afraid to go to your advisors. Even if you like, I remember when I first started writing abstracts, I was very like, they've been doing this for a long time and mine is just going to sound so elementary compared to what they can write. And so I was just kind of nervous to show them, but they are there for you, like you to use and for like questions and help. And so don't be afraid to run things by your advisors. And another thing that I've been told is sometimes I have a bad habit of kind of keeping those sections separate. So I'll put in my background for an abstract and then I just jump right into my project. But you kind of want to make a cohesive flow from the background to the why you're doing this project. And sometimes I'm really bad about doing that. So just make sure it kind of you're stating why you're doing this and what you're filling with your project.
I know for me, the best abstracts are written in the blood of red ink. What do I mean by that? Basically, everyone pretty much sucks at writing when they first written abstracts. Pretty much, literally everybody. That includes me. And if you're willing to go to your advisors for help, the first set of response or comments you get are going to be covered head to toe in red ink, is what I mean. And basically, you send back a second one, and then only half of it is covered in blood. And then next time you keep going. When I say blood, I mean red ink. I realize how extreme that sounds. But basically, you're going to get your comments back and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know why I turned this into them. But that was good because that's the fastest way to get to, writing something that is more tangible and coherent. So don't be afraid of that process. Accept it and embrace it because it's going to happen to you no matter what, basically.
And then I would say two things. One, coming from a serial procrastinator, do it early, start early, at least a first draft sometime, because this is what you're submitting to the conference. This is the first impression of your project. So it needs to be polished. And beyond that, obviously never be afraid to ask for help from your advisor or just have a second pair of eyes in any kind of writing. A second pair of eyes is to look over your work is just such an invaluable asset. And beyond that, make sure you know what you're talking about. I realize that kind of sounds obvious, but especially if you're combining that with procrastinating and you have to think about what problem in my field am I addressing? What have our results said? What were we trying to get out of the results before we even had any? What was our original hypothesis? If you don't have strong answers to these questions and you're trying to write your abstract, it's just not going to make any sense. So you have to really be invested in your project to write a good abstract.
Thank you, guys. So I'm on to my last question, and then I'll leave it open to you guys for any final comments that you might have come up with as we've gone through this. But have you guys done either a poster or an oral presentation? And if you've kind of done both, what do you think are the pros and cons of each so that people going into ARC kind of have an idea of which one they might want to choose?
I know for me, I have not done a formal talk at a presentation, but I've done multiple poster presentations. And I would say definitely the pros to posters is that it's more personal. What happened to me one time is that basically right after I was done talking to a small group of people, like 2 or 3, I can't remember the exact number, I got handed a business card from one of the professors and he's like, yeah, here you go. Here's my business card. Feel free to email me. Right. And that was a potential connection, potential networking opportunity that is harder to get with a talk because everyone's sitting down is kind of displaced from you. They could come up to you afterwards, but it's more likely to happen in real time, I think, at a poster. So definitely take advantage of that. Connections are, I don't think I need to sell you guys on the importance of being able to develop connections and meet new people that contain relevance to your field. I figured that's an invaluable asset. I think everybody knows that, right? So take advantage of that. Try and get as many people hooked in as possible and see if you can't establish connections along the way.
So I've personally done both. I did the oral presentation at ARC last year, and I've done a few poster presentations as well. I personally, like Tyler was saying, I find that the poster sessions are just more for me because it's more of an open discussion about your research. People that are interested are able to come up, see your work, listen to your elevator pitch, and then you get that kind of conversation going about your research. And I enjoyed doing the oral presentation because it let me just practice becoming a better speaker in front of a bigger audience. But as a person in the STEM field, I enjoy the poster presentation personally because, like I said, it gives you that open conversation.
And I've also only had a poster presentation, but I would say it's much more, I think personal is a good way to put it. The way you talk is much more conversational, so people can ask you questions in the middle of things, and it sounds much more casual. You're just explaining to someone, hey, this is what we're doing. It's not a formal setting, but that does have a flip side to it. Your location in the venue can really help you or really hurt you. Because for Fuse, they had our posters all lined up in a kind of an arc, starting at the door and moving into the middle of the room. And my poster was right by the door. So we almost consistently always had like a chunk of 3 or so people just because everyone's coming in through there. But after the conference, I talked to one of my friends who was over on the far side. He hardly had anybody because no one ever got that far. Because all the presentations, people just go one by one, and some of them just never even got to the end. So an advantage of an oral presentation, I would assume, is that everybody's there and everybody will hear it. There's not this chance that, well, if we're not in a good place, we may get half as much traffic as we could have.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to harp on, is the fact that in oral presentation, you are who people are paying attention to. There's no really like outside distractions. They're only there to see what you did in your research. But again, the personal, like kind of conversational part of it does make it a little easier, in my opinion, because it's a conversation. You're preparing like a 1 to 3 minute elevator speech of you kind of giving all the details, but then past that, it's just kind of a free for all. But with an oral presentation, you are having that kind of, you are the star of the kind of scenario, or you're on a panel with other professionals and you are kind of all in the same field or all studying similar things. And so you can kind of it can kind of turn into not a debate, but you guys all giving your takes on certain aspects, which I think can help not only develop your kind of ability to not defend your topic, but it could be defending your topic, but kind of hearing other points of views from fellow students that maybe you hadn't thought of. But I think another thing that I took from when I presented at ARC a few years ago was that by presenting at ARC, I was able to, presenting a poster, I was able to kind of get feedback from kind of professors that may not have seen my work, that they were able to give me feedback for when I went and presented at other conferences, to be like, hey, you need to change this because this is not correct, or whatever else. So that is one thing, is it can also serve as like a way to get really good feedback. So yeah, but I'm going to kind of leave it open to you guys if you guys have any final comments before we kind of move on.
I have one, and I just thought about this a bit ago. It was quite hilarious. I was presenting at GURC, and I remember explicitly that one of the people that easily got the most amount of attention, it was like an engineering robotics guy, and he had like the robot arm out there on the floor with his poster, and he was able to get it to move. And I just remember, I just recently remembered, I'm like, God, he got so much attention that whole time, like during that whole conference. So many people walked up to his thing. And I kind of like, in my head, I'm like, oh, if I could like bring lab equipment, on like by the poster presentation, have a little card that displays what it does, maybe I can get more people to come talk because they're like, ooh, shiny object. So if you have the capacity to do that, like if there is a way that you can include like physical objects to bring during something like a poster presentation, I think that could be a valuable asset, or just like something that can increase potential participation. But yeah, that's my last closing thoughts there.
I have a comment about like preparing for your actual presentation. Is when you're like going through your elevator pitch, when you're going through your presentation, think about potential questions that people could ask you, because I remember my first presentation, someone asked me a question I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't have an answer because I was like, that's actually a good question that I don't know. So, and you're always able to admit that you don't know. You don't want to tell people the wrong information, but just prepare for questions that you think might come up. And another good way to do that is go present to your advisors and then have them help you think of questions that could potentially come up with your presentation.
And then I would just say, just jumping on, like harping on the point again of just use your resources. Ask your advisor if you don't know what to do in any part of the process, or if you need some help. Present some of your drafts or rehearsal of your pitch to your friends or your family or anybody who will listen. Having another person to help you with any part of the process is just such an asset. And if you have access to that, which you probably do, just use it. It makes things so much easier, so much simpler.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, all of you. That was amazing. I appreciate all the feedback. I feel like I learned something from it too. So I just wanted to, before I wrap this up, ask the audience, do you have any questions of anything that we talked about for our student experts or anything that we shared? Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, I wanted to give you guys resources to reach out to us. So we do have a new CURCA Assistant Director who will be spearheading and leading ARC. Dr. Diego Pinheiro, who's on the Gainesville campus. He is fantastic, and he is going to be leading it, so you can email him, or you can always email us, curca@ung.edu, if you have a question, if you want to, I don't know if anyone's in robotics, but if you want to have something that you want to add to your poster session, even like a video or something, and you want to work out how you can arrange that, send us an email at curca@ung.edu, and we'll try to figure it out with you. I also wanted to say you can also reach out to our CURCA faculty fellows, also on our Gainesville campus, Dr. Efrain Velazquez or Dr. Brenna Quarles, or anyone in the CURCA office that we are between, and this is us usually on the Dahlonega campus, and Dr. Anastasia Lynn, myself, Allison Brindell, or Hannah Johnson. So basically, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Madison, Sebastian, Tyler. I really appreciate all your insights, and your feedback, and your tips. You've made this workshop even more elevated. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Okay. Well, I hope you all have a fantastic day and hope to all see you at ARC if it works out for everyone. Hope you stay dry out there, and thank you again.
All right. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.